Well, hi, welcome to The Christian Contrast, where we talk about how walking with Jesus leads us to live differently than those in the world around us. And for this episode, I'm here just for a solo one. We've been in the midst of a 4-episode series where we've been talking about what it looks like to belong to the church in a healthy way. So we've already done 2 of those episodes. If you haven't watched them, highly recommend that you watch them. One where we talk about the whole significance of gathering for worship, and one where we talk about the significance of belonging and involvement outside Sunday mornings in different life groups and Bible studies and things like that. We're going to be back to that soon. Probably in the next episode, we'll be back to continue on the 3rd and 4th parts of that series. But we've had some different scheduling things because it's summertime and people are gone at different things. And so I'm going to take an opportunity for a solo episode. And this will be a little bit different than many of the things that we do in other episodes, because most of the time we're talking about a subject or sort of a topic. We're going to be talking about a topic, but with this one, we're going to be talking specifically about Jordan Peterson and his take on faith. And we don't normally do episodes that are sort of targeted or evaluating one specific person. But Jordan Peterson, a lot of you know who he is. If you don't know who he is, he's a Canadian psychologist who, for about the last decade, has become very, very famous through different books, YouTube incidents and lectures and debates, talking about issues related to politics, and then also talking about issues related to faith, talking about issues related to masculinity. I mean, just all sorts of things. He's a huge figure. And one of the reasons why I think that he's worth talking about in this episode is because he has been so highly influential in our world, and in particular among Christians. And I think for a long time, Christians haven't known quite what to do with Jordan Peterson, because there's a lot of things that he says and talks about that seem to be so good and so beneficial and seem to be so in line with a Christian framework. And then he says other things that, especially as evangelical Christians, make us kind of crinkle our brows and say, what's he talking about here? Is he Christian? Is he not a Christian? Is he somebody just with a Christian framework? Where does he stand on all these things? Does he actually believe any of this? And so because of that, Jordan Peterson has been in a lot of different interactions where people have looked to nail him down on questions of faith and the existence of God. In fact, just even as we're getting ready to release this episode, there was recently a Jubilee episode. If you don't know what that is, they do these different videos where there will be somebody that holds certain positions and they'll be sort of round table debating like 20 to 25 people who disagree with them. So they did one with Jordan Peterson, and that's brought back into the forefront of people's minds questions regarding his take on faith. So to me, this is worth talking about because it's worth talking about just the whole subject of faith, and because it's worth talking about his specific take and understanding on faith. And so I'm going to do this through sort of 3, they're not exact quotes, but basically 3 ideas that Jordan Peterson frequently talks about when he's questioned about faith, and specifically faith in the existence of God or in being a Christian. So number 1, something that frequently he says when he's asked if he believes in God, for instance, is he'll say, I act or I behave as if God exists. And then he'll say, that is my definition of faith. So let's just start with that one. Faith is acting as if something is true. I actually think in many ways, this is very helpful in defining faith. It's not all that could be said about the definition of faith, but a definition of faith that I've used frequently is faith is behaving as if you're certain about something that is uncertain. And that's largely based on what Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 talks about. The idea is that faith is the assurance of things unseen and the certainty about what we don't yet have. So the whole idea behind faith is that you believe something and you act with certainty about it, even though there's a level of uncertainty because you haven't seen it, you haven't yet received it, that there's some level of doubt that could be put in the equation of whether or not it's going to happen. And so this is true of lots of things. This is true of the existence of God. There certainly are not no reasons to believe in God. There's lots of reasons to believe in God, apart from just reading the Bible and seeing what it says. Just the whole idea of creation, the whole idea of order in the universe, the idea that we as human beings seem to reflect that there's something greater than us. So whatever it is, there's lots of reasons to believe in God, but there's doubt. For at least, I think the vast majority of us, we haven't seen him. We haven't heard him speaking to us in a way that is unmistakable and that we could prove is not just kind of our own intuitions or our own thoughts in our heads. So there is reason to doubt the existence of God, but faith is acting as if or behaving as if we are certain about the existence of God. And so I actually think that when he talks this way, when Jordan Peterson talks about the whole idea of I act as if this is true, that's mostly helpful. It's a good framework because it's taken it out of the idea that faith costs us nothing. That faith is just sort of purely in my head, purely in my thoughts, assenting that something is true. Now, we're going to get into this as we go further into the episode, but there are different ways in the Bible that the word faith and the idea of believe are used. And we'll delve into that in the second part of what I want to talk about as far as claims of Jordan Peterson. But the significance of the whole idea of that faith is acting as if something is true, my definition, behaving with certainty about something that's uncertain. One of the reasons why I think that this is helpful and important for those of us who are believers is that sometimes we can feel like faith is when I feel my feelings, my emotions are as if I am certain that God is real, that Jesus is real, that I'm really forgiven, that the Holy Spirit lives within me, whatever it is, whatever faith claim, that departed believers are now with the Lord, that I feel certainty about it. And if I feel doubt, then that means I'm a doubter and that my faith isn't very strong. What I want to say is I think that have probably been a lot of times in life where Christians have behaved with faith even though they felt doubt and uncertainty and fear. We recently in one of our services went through the story of the Israelites crossing the Red Sea. It's very hard for me to imagine that as the Israelites crossed through dry land in the middle of the Red Sea, that most of them, if not all of them, were filled with some level of doubt that the walls of water were going to hold up and we're not going to drown them. Maybe not. Maybe some of them were just skipping along, feeling with absolute certainty in their bodies, in their emotions, that they were absolutely safe. I just doubt it. I think that there must, for most of them, or probably for all of them, been some level of, is this going to work? But you know what they did? They walked forward. They behaved as if they were literally on solid ground and as if God was going to do what he promised. They behaved with faith, even though, I got to assume most of them had feelings and thoughts of doubt. That is life. If you're experiencing feelings and thoughts of doubt, that doesn't mean that you can't behave with faith. Faith is much more of a choice than a feeling that we get. Now here's maybe the little add-on to this. As we continue to practice faith in God and in what he said, the emotions that go along with steps of faith tend to change. It tends to get easier. And maybe the illustration here could be if you're a parent and your kid is really young and you're at a pool and you're telling them to jump off the side and that you will catch them. And if you've ever done this, for most kids, it takes a lot of coaxing. Like it takes a lot of work to get them to do it. No, really, it's going to be okay. Go ahead, jump. I will catch you. You know, I'm your parent. I care about you. I'm not going to let anything bad happen to you. All of that. And then eventually, filled with fear, you finally get them to jump and they jump. Well, you do this a few more times and pretty soon they're not scared anymore. Or they're way less scared. There might be a part of their minds that say, all right, I'm taking a risk in this, but the risk feels much less because they've seen the repeated pattern of you coming through and being faithful to do what you've said you're going to do. That happens for those of us who are believers. So if you're a young believer, there might be some times where there are steps of faith where you say, gosh, I'm going to do this, but this is so scary. I'm so terrified. Like the feelings of confidence in God are not very high. But God willing, as you continue to walk in faith and mature in your faith, the times that you decide to take God at his word and take the risk of faith, the feelings are less overwhelming. The sense of doubt and uncertainty is less overwhelming because you've experienced the repeated pattern of God being faithful. So if in some ways we're going to rate, like maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, these Jordan Peterson statements, with like 10 being this is an absolutely rock solid great statement, and 0 being this is a terrible statement, nobody should hold to it. The whole idea of that faith is acting as if something's true, I'd say that'd be pretty high. That'd be 8 or 9, maybe a 9 on that. Like a little bit of clarification needed, but still solid definition of faith. Here's the second Jordan Peterson statement or idea that I want to go over. His belief or his thinking that you can't say that you believe something unless you're willing to stake your life on it. And the reason why this is significant is because in a lot of his interactions where Peterson is pressed on, do you believe in God, or do you believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, he'll be very reticent to say whether or not he believes it. And one of the things that he'll then go on to say is to say that you believe in God means that you orient your entire life around that idea, that you are absolutely sold out to it. So he's reluctant to talk about whether or not he believes in God or believes in the resurrection of the dead, because he basically is saying you can't say that you believe something unless you're absolutely willing to stake your life on it. This idea from Jordan Peterson, if the first one is like, hey, 9 out of 10, mostly a good statement, this one's more in the 5 out of 10 range, where there's a part of it that I think is really good and helpful. There's a part of it that I think is very unhelpful and even confusing to people. So here's the helpful part. The helpful part of this statement is that Peterson is rightly recognizing that saying that we believe in God or saying that we believe in Jesus has implications. It's not just something casual. It has real implications of how we ought to live. And in fact, if our lives don't reflect that we trust in Jesus, then can we really say that we do? In the same way that there's a famous illustration of a tightrope walker who was walking back and forth around a tightrope, and a whole bunch of people came out and watched them. And eventually they started walking back and forth in the tightrope with a wheelbarrow, and successfully did it, 8, 10 times, and then put a whole bunch of weight in the wheelbarrow that, like 200 pounds of weight, and walked back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and had this great showing of competency in this. And the tightrope walker talked to one of the onlookers, and the onlooker said, gosh, you're amazing. I bet you could walk back and forth on that tightrope with that wheelbarrow filled with all that weight as much as you wanted to, and you would never drop it. And the tightrope walker says, okay, then get in. Get in the wheelbarrow. Let's find out if you really believe that. And there's an essence of that with the idea of faith, of us saying, I believe in Jesus. But if there's a whole bunch of commands and guidance that he's given where we said, all right, I think that I'll just go ahead and do it my own way, then do we really believe? So there's a part of this that's so right, that's so good, that's recognizing the stakes of faith, that's recognizing that the Christian life is not casual. It's not just I'm checking Christian as my religion on a census form or something like that. It really is life transforming. The bad part of this idea that, you can't say you believe something unless you're willing to stake your life on it, is that it doesn't recognize the frailty of human beings and the fact that we wrestle with and struggle in faith. It's not even an excuse to say that we shouldn't be all in. It's just a recognition that nobody lives perfectly consistently with what they say they believe. And most of us don't think that we can't therefore say we still believe those things. Like Peterson, sometimes when he's talking about the idea of the audacity of saying that you believe in God, the audacity of saying that as if that means that your entire life is devoted to that. And if your entire life isn't demonstrably devoted to that, then you can't really say that you believe in God. I just think that this is totally off track. The parallel I would use is this. There is an ideal and a calling to any of us who are husbands. Certainly to wives as well, but just as a guy, I'll talk about it in terms of being a husband. There's a call to care for your wife, to provide for your wife, to be utterly devoted to her, to have eyes only for her, to be thinking of her above yourself, especially as believers in Jesus, to think like I'm sacrificing my preferences and my wants and my desires in order to do what's best for her. All of that is the calling of a husband. And if I were to get up on a Sunday morning and look at all the husbands who are in the congregation and say, the audacity for you to call yourself a husband when you have times that you get mad at your wife, and when you have times that you're selfish instead of being giving to her, the audacity of claiming that you're a husband when you're not absolutely living up to the ideal of being a husband. I just think that would be silly. Like, you are a husband. Now, maybe right now you're not a very good husband. Maybe right now you're a pretty good husband. Maybe right now you're like a really good husband, but you're not fulfilling the ideal of being a husband. You're still a husband. Now, this isn't a 100% perfect parallel to those of us who are Christians, but there is a sense of recognizing, hey, like we're at different points in our maturity on this, and we're at different points in how successfully we're living this out. But I even think about the man who came to Jesus, who was requesting a healing and said, for my son, if you can do anything for him. And Jesus really keyed in on the word if, saying, if. Like, do you really believe? You're saying, if I can do anything for him? And the man said to him, I believe, help me in my unbelief. I think that is a totally legitimate cry for those of us who are believers in Jesus. Like, none of us are living utterly consistently with what we say we believe. Nobody in the world is. Nobody who is a vegan or a vegetarian is living perfectly consistently with what they say they believe. Nobody who is pro-choice or pro-life is living perfectly consistently with what they say they believe. And please hear me on this. I'm not saying that we should just shrug our shoulders at hypocrisy. And I don't even believe I'm talking about hypocrisy here, because hypocrisy is being fake. What I'm saying is we are people who fall short. And what we're talking about is growth in the Christian life, and fruit tends to come gradually. And so I think it's a very strange thing for Peterson to have this idea, like who could claim to believe in God as if you're just throwing it around? Well, in some sense, belief, even in the Bible, is talked about as something that just happens in your head. In James 2, faith is talked about this way to some degree, where he says, all right, you believe that God is one, good job. The demons believe that also. The demons believe. James says the demons believe that. The demons have faith in that. So there is a level of belief, but we all know that the demons aren't oriented around the idea that everything that they should do is predicated on the idea that there is, certainly what we as Christians fully believe, that there is one true God and that he is all good and all loving and all trustworthy and those sorts of things. So there is a level, there is a way to talk about believing that is just sort of low stakes. Like, I believe that Abraham Lincoln was the president during the Civil War. That belief doesn't deeply cost me something, but I definitely do believe it. Now, our faith in Christ is much, much deeper and life transforming for that. And that's why this statement is like a 5, because it gets half of that right, but it misses the idea that you can say, that you can take the plunge and say, I do believe in God. I do believe in the resurrection of the dead. I do believe that Jesus died for all of my sins. I do believe that Jesus is Lord. I do believe that Christians who die are now with the Lord, and I believe in the final resurrection from the dead. I believe that Jesus is coming back one day. And yet, if you look at my life and say, well, the way that you behaved that time and the way that you're handling money, like you're not fully sold out to this in the way that you could. And in some of it, I might agree and say, God, like, all right, you're right. like I need to look at that and I need to grow in that and I need to continue to grow in these different ways. I don't think it puts us in a position where we could say the audacity of me saying that I believe this. There's a big difference between hypocrisy and just the inconsistencies of life as we're looking to walk with Jesus and live out our faith. So all right, if we have this statement, faith is acting as if something's true. All right, I'm giving that a 9 out of 10. If we're talking about you can't say you believe something unless you stake your life on it. Otherwise, the audacity of saying you believe it when you have inconsistencies, I'm like 5 out of 10. It's helpful in some ways, really unhelpful in other ways. The third one that I want to talk about, and this is again specific to Peterson, is that often when pressed about whether or not he believes in God, he'll say it's none of your business whether I believe in God. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. It's none of your business whether or not I'm a Christian. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I'm giving this like a one, like maybe if I'm being generous, like a 2 out of 10. Like I think that this is just pretty off base. And even puts it in a position where I feel like it's strange. And I want to be charitable to Peterson because I don't know how much this reflects just an internal angst and struggle that's very genuine on his part. I tend to want to believe that it is, that it's not him just being evasive, but that it does deal with the genuine angst that he has and maybe hasn't yet worked through to a healthy point. But for those of us who are believers in Jesus, the idea that we would say to anybody, it's none of your business what I believe. It's none of your business whether or not I believe in God. It's none of your business whether or not I believe in the resurrection of Jesus. That's just a non-starter for us as believers. Jesus talked in Matthew 10 about those who acknowledge him before others will be acknowledged before the Father in heaven. Those who deny him before others will be denied before the Father in heaven. There's no sense in either the Old Testament or the New Testament of our faith being something that's private and personal only. It certainly is personal for each of us. We're not just sort of part of a movement and we're cogs in a machine. We as evangelicals often talk about a personal relationship with God, which is terminology that's not used in the Bible, but we believe that it's terminology that's descriptive of the idea that this is really a personal connection, that I am a child of God. I'm not just part of the children of God. I as an individual am a child of God. So it's personal, but it's never just personal. Our faith is meant to be lived out in the public square. We are meant to make disciples of all nations. We are meant to let the light shine, the light of Jesus shine, so that people see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven. We are wanting people to know that we are Christians because we're wanting people to become Christians. We're wanting people to know that we believe in God because we want people to believe in God. And even more specifically, we're wanting people to know that we believe that Jesus is Lord and that he's risen from the dead because we want them to believe that also. And again, with Peterson, there's so many things that he said, like I've read his 12 books for life. I've watched countless videos of his. We've done different reaction videos to stuff that he's done. There's so much about him that I value and that I like. And when I hear people are kind of watching his content, I think tends to be good. There tend to be really good results of that. But as believers in Jesus, I think it's very important that we are thoughtful about the people that we are allowing to be significant influences in the way that we live and the way that we think. So when it comes to somebody like Jordan Peterson, there's a big part where I'm like, yeah, that's a lot better of an influence than a lot of people out there, especially than a lot of people on YouTube. And at the same time, I think we need to recognize the limitations of what it is that he has to offer if he is at a point of saying, I don't think it's anybody's business whether or not somebody believes in God. And if he seems to have this hang up to think that somebody can't claim that they believe in God or that they're a Christian unless they're living with perfect consistency about it. I think that those are beliefs and ideas that are going to get us on the wrong track. And so this is just like many people with Peterson, where we can see lots and lots of good and lots of really helpful stuff, but then also hesitate and say, we're not going to allow him to be our guide on how we live out our relationship with Jesus, because the way that he thinks about it and the way that he talks about it is just very different than a biblical framework for this. So once again, the purpose of this video is not even because we think that we've got to react or talk to anything that Jordan Peterson says, but just to say that the issues that he's dealing with and the way that he's talking about this is having an influence on how people are thinking about their faith. And so I think it's worth taking that back to the scriptures and saying, how do we think about the things that he's saying from a scriptural standpoint? What are the things that he's saying that we want to say, amen, great, that's very helpful? What are the things that we want to say, okay, maybe a little bit helpful, but there's some clarifications? And what are the things that we want to have the absolute freedom to say, we just think he's wrong about that? And hopefully this video was helpful in just walking through some of those things. We like to put out content from the Christian Contrast. We do videos every other week. So every 2 weeks, there's a new podcast episode that we put out. We also have all of those episodes on our YouTube channel for Life Bible Fellowship Church and on our website for lbf.church. And so if you want to find other videos, or if you want to leave comments and questions and feedback, I always like to go back and look at the comments on the videos and see if there's some healthy interaction that can be had. I'd welcome all that and invite you to do that. But we'll look forward to being back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode. Until then, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to the Christian Contrast.